All right, all right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Marcos Conan, and beside me here, as always, is Ben, the Jet. Rats, Ben. It's been a couple days since I've seen you. How have you been, brother?
I mean, good, man. It's the weather is unfortunately heating up to a point of triple digits here in California. It's our beautiful time of the year where heat stroke runs rampant on the streets. But other than that, doing good, man. The finals are kind of surprising me so far.
Really? I don't know. I guess I thought it would be less of a surprise for you because you called it correctly going into it.
I did. I just thought it might be a little more competitive, and I mean, we're gonna get into that here in a minute. But yeah, I'm doing pretty good.
That's good, brother. I'm doing well as well. So, yeah, like you said, we thought game one especially was going to be a little bit more competitive than it was, and everything was going as according to plan. It was going to be a fun, competitive series until Kristaps Porzingis stepped on the floor in the first quarter of game one, and that was, if there was one take from our last pod that I was totally wrong on, it was definitely the fact that I thought there was going to be kind of a Kristaps coming back process where they were going to try and work him in a little bit more. I didn't think it was he was going to come out hot and make everything to start the game.
Yeah.
What about game one, whether it was early on or later on, stood out to you the most?
Just how unprepared the Mavericks were, to be honest with you. From a team who has been competing against essentially all of the top teams in the West through this playoff run, I really thought that they would be more prepared than they were going into game one. And that was shocking to me. I obviously, looking at the box scores, Luka had like a triple-double in game one. It was like 30, 11, and 11.
No, he had 30, 11, and 1, actually. He only had one assist.
Oh, that's right. It was, that's right.
Two, yeah.
So that was that's a great point. That's what shocked me the most was how Luka only had one assist. And looking back on it, it was a complete lack of production from the rest of his team. And that kind of stuff, like on a stage as big as this, at this point in the season, you need everything out of everybody. And we talked about in the last episode, like, you've made it this far. Regardless of what team you're on, you made it this far. You've got to give your absolute all, everything you've got into these last 4 to 7 games. And I didn't see that in game one.
Do you think it was like, do you think it could have been just that the difference in experience, considering Boston had been there last year and the only member of the Mavs that really had that level of experience was Kyrie? Do you think that they might have had just like a little level of stage fright going into this?
Yes, I do. And especially looking at that team, there's some young guys that the Mavericks have leaned on for a majority of the second part of the season. And of course, that's the biggest stage that they've seen their entire life. And so from that aspect of it, it does make sense, yes. But, we talked about last week and weeks before, like how important momentum is going into, these different series. And obviously with the finals, momentum we thought was going to play a major role. Now, momentum in a lot of ways can kind of take away a lot of those butterflies because you're like, we're rolling. Like, we just got to play our game. And from someone who, like Luka, who talks about when he was playing, the other side of the world, he says that those were like some of the most incredible atmospheric games that he's ever played in. Like, it doesn't even rival anything that goes on here. So from that standpoint, it does kind of make sense looking at his box score and what he does in game one. And obviously we'll get into game two, but Kyrie's done this dance before. And where was he? He was Houdini Irving.
Yeah, it was really bad. He disappeared in a way that I wasn't expecting because, like, listen, I understand that the size and the physicality that Boston plays with presents an issue. And that's something we noticed not just in game one, but in game two as well. Like, there was times like, they were making it a little bit difficult to get to his spots, but he was getting looks that were makeable for at least a guy like Kyrie Irving. And he's folded so far. He hasn't played up to the level, and it's not even just offensively, it's on the defensive end as well. He's been super impactful for the series that he went when they were playing the West, he was a huge impact defensively, and he's been. And I have a little nugget here. I think he was 11 and 16 in these first two games. Like the opponent's shooting 11 of 16, and he's allowed 27 points when he's been the primary defender. So they're kind of just roasting him, and it's not just him. He's not the whole defense, but it's the same thing with Luka. And I wonder with Luka if, and we especially noticed this in game two. Like, do you think the injuries kind of caught up with him here? Like like he's obviously still performing, but when we saw this in game one and in game two, the Celtics were just targeting him. Like they're switching. We're going to attack Luka and hope for the best and see what happens there.
I think regardless, he's the guy you attack because his defense is subpar. I mean, he's a freaking traffic cone out there for a vast majority of every game. And I mean, it reminds me of like 2018 James Harden. You know what I mean? Like the James Harden who just didn't really give that effort on defense because he knew going down the other side of the court, he was going to get those points back. And if the other team didn't score on us, well, I'm one-upping you. Yeah. And it's eerily similar in a lot of ways. It just works a lot better because Luka's a lot better than that version of James Harden. But do I think the injuries really played the role? It very well could have. I think regardless, the Celtics were always going to pick on Luka because you got to pick your poison. Like, who do we want to beat us? And the guy that they were always going to kind of give that to it had to be Luka because you can't really stop him. The fans have enough of a role when you're in Boston of getting into Kyrie's head, and that's shown. I mean, he hasn't beaten Boston at all since he was there, and that's
0-12 now.
It's insane. That's an insane stat to even wrap your head around. And the boos, he did it to himself. He said that they weren't loud enough. He expected more after game one, and they got even louder. It's gotten to a point for me like. We talk about like you can only let one guy beat you. Well, they were going to go at Luka every time because you can try and tire him out on the defensive end. And then maybe on the offensive end, he's going to kind of feel that exhaustion as the game progresses. And I think kind of seen that because the second half of both games, he kind of loses that rhythm that he's got going. Like early in both games, he was cooking like pretty well, and then you kind of see the slow progression of or rather regression, just going downhill, and that kind of thing makes me worried the rest of the series for them.
Yeah, and I think, and to go off your point, in these first two games, he's 2 of 10 in total in the fourth quarter. So it checks out that he has just kind of been slumping as the game goes on, and you can only take so many beatings, and with the Celtics approaching their offense the way they are, they're still shooting a lot of threes, but especially in game two, they were driving by them. I think in game one, I found it really interesting with just how discombobulated that team really was, the Mavs. And, we talk about the other role players like PJ Washington, Derek Jones Jr. They've been so impactful because they're making their shots, and that's what makes them impactful. But I also think the way Boston is kind of approaching this is because they're so good defensively, they don't have to double. You see most of these teams double Luka. I think on Sunday they doubled Luka 13 times, and that was the most they had doubled any player so far in the postseason. But in game one, they weren't really doing that either. They were just letting Tatum guard him, Brown guard him, Holiday guard him. Like everyone was just guarding him one-on-one, and that takes there's not as many open looks for these guys who would normally have a much more open opportunity. But don't get me wrong, they still had plenty of opportunities to convert, and they just weren't hitting their shots. The Mavs are going cold at the worst possible time.
Yeah, and speaking of, and another insane stat for the Mavericks, the only player to score multiple threes, meaning 2 or more, throughout the entire series so far, is Luka. Yeah. Everybody else on the Mavs has 1 or 0 threes made. That's including Kyrie. Like that's ridiculous.
Kyrie went 0 of 8 in game 2. I think the stat I was listening to the Hoop Collective with Brian Windhorst and that group, and they said that non-Luka players are shooting 7 of 32 from 3 right now throughout the series, and that's bad. and Kyrie's 0 of 8, and that's like Kyrie shooting what? He's 13 of 37 through both games. He last so let's pivot a little more to game 2 because game 1 was kind of a wash. Like
Yeah.
game 1, the Mavericks just disappeared and they just had to do a whole crawling back act. They got back, they cut it down to 8, and then they inevitably just couldn't push after that. And it was a clunker and disappointing. And then when you think about game 1s under Jason Kidd, they've lost 5 of their past 6. So in hindsight, when I was thinking, I was a little panicked. I was like, oh, this might be over. But at the same time, I was like, wait, they lose game 1s all the time. Let's see how they respond in game 2.
Mm-hmm.
And like one thing we noticed because we were watching it together, one thing I noticed when we were watching it was the first quarter. I thought the Dallas did a really good job of kind of setting the tone until the last 2 minutes of the quarter because they were up 8, and I was like, okay, this is a great start. And then Boston hits a 3, Luka turns the ball over, and then all of a sudden Peyton Pritchard just hits a 40-foot buzzer beater, and I'm like, oh, it's going to be like that. Now they're only down 1. So, and that was another thing about game 2 that really stood out to me was Boston shot 10 of 39 from 3. They were horrible all there, horrible all game. They were missing just wide open shots.
Yep.
And I believe going into halftime, they were 2 of 12, and weren't they up at halftime? So it's like, it just showed if you're Dallas, you have to play perfect. If they want any shot, and it's not just Luka. Luka's doing all he can. I mean, he had 8 turnovers in game 2, but the rest of the crew needs to do something. Kyrie especially needs to that was the point. I said part of my reason for picking them was because I thought Kyrie could score 25, 30 points a game in the biggest stage, not only make 13 shots. So this is definitely something that has me worried, and they're not, with Kristaps being there, that disadvantage of, I thought Lively was going to make an impact. And a fun little nugget on Lively, he is the youngest player ever to play at an NBA Finals. I didn't know that, so I thought that was a cool stat. He beat out Magic Johnson by however many months or whatever. But yeah. But he hasn't made an impact either. And Gafford, the thing with Kristaps being back was that the way they can spread the floor, and not just offensively. Kristaps has been a dog defensively too, impacting them like crazy. But obviously the main takeaway from game 2 was that Kristaps did get hurt. And they reported on it today. They said what it was. They said it was some rare injury, something that you don't normally see. But basically, he dislocated a tendon in his left knee. Excuse me, in his left knee, and he's been dealing with a right calf injury. That's the one. So it's on his other leg now. But they've shown videos of him walking around. He's come out and said that he wants to play. That the only reason he's not going to play is if the coaches tell him not to. So he says he's good to go. He hasn't been ruled out. So I thought that was going to, that was something to keep an eye on, but it looks like he's going to be there. But I do wonder if game 3, what his role is going to be and how good he's actually feeling.
I mean, with the way that the Mavericks have played the first 2 games, I think if Kristaps didn't play a second of basketball, I think the Celtics would still hand it to him. And it really does come down to what I'm seeing out of Boston is what I expected to see out of Boston when we talked about this last week. I'm seeing we have to win this. It's not a matter of, it's okay, we'll lose this round against Golden State, we'll lose this round against the Mavericks, and we'll be back here next year or whenever, right? No, not seeing that out of the Celtics this year. And you couldn't see that out of them. If they were to bring that, they would probably be losing these games against the Mavericks, and they'd be in the boat where it's like, what are we doing right now with how crappy the Mavericks are playing and we're still losing to them? Mm-hmm. You touched up on the way that the Celtics, are shot the ball in game 2. That has been indicative of their entire season. They'll have 2 games where they just go lights out from 3, and then they follow it up with one just clunker. And there were a select amount of games that they were, they shot terrible and they actually lost. A lot of them, they still found a way to win. And that is the part that separates them from the Mavericks the most in this series, is the Mavericks are not playing great either. Neither team has really played a great game yet. One of them will, and it'll probably be this next game. And it's up in the air. It very well could be Mavericks. They could rebound very well. We'll see. But it's going to be interesting to see if the Celtics really get rolling. The series might not be close. This could be a 4-game series.
Right, and I think just kind of like how I'm gonna compare like how I felt like everyone was treating the Timberwolves. I think everybody made the same mistake with the Mavericks versus Boston, that Boston is very clearly the better team. And like you mentioned, like they had poor shooting nights, but it comes down to like, oh, if Jason Tatum has a bad shooting night, especially like he has this whole series, we have Drew Holiday, we have Kristaps Porzingis, we have Derek White, we have Jaylen Brown. They're not, they don't have one elite top two, top three player like Luka. Luka is arguably, we can make a debate now from how these first 2 games have gone, that he's been the best player statistically in this series, at least on the offensive end, right? But
Definitely.
that's the Celtics built their team around having 2 top 10 players and having just great support players around them who are equally all-star level caliber players. And that's a question I want to throw out to you, because outside of Luka, how many Celtics would you pick over the next best Maverick? And that's the question: is Kyrie really been the next best Maverick this series, or has it been PJ Washington? Like,
it's been PJ for me.
So the question to me for you would be, how many of those Celtics would you pick before you pick the next Mav players, or if you would pick any of the Celtics player before Luka? Like, I guess my point is that like the top 6 Celtics players are better than
Exactly.
and the Mavericks' success was banking on the fact that they had the 2 best players in this series, and Kyrie has not stepped up to the plate. I think that's been like the harshest takeaway from the Mavericks side of things.
Yeah, and another thing too with looking back at the Mavericks and more recently just the series against the Timberwolves. The Timberwolves had an issue all year long, and even in the playoffs, with closing games out, closing runs out, closing quarters out. Like there would be random quarters in games where they would go ice cold, and they would allow the other team to make a run and have a shot at winning, maybe win the game. It would be close, right? The Celtics don't do that, and the Mavericks are running into that problem now because it was a somewhat close game in game 2 near the end, and they kept like knocking on the door, getting back to like 6 points, and then it was 8 and 10, and then it was 6 points, and then it was like 10 and 12, and it was like, this is the thing that the Mavericks, they hadn't really seen since really OKC and I guess the Clippers, but really just OKC in this whole run.
Mm-hmm.
Which OKC has done really well all year, is just building an insane lead to start, and then they have so much cushion to hold on to. The Celtics play a very complete game, and I can honestly tell you, the 2 games that they've played, they haven't been their best, but they've found any and every way to win that game in complete different ways, right? Like, right. It's been on the defensive end. It's been on, figuring out how to get the ball into whoever can get a shot for us. And a lot of the times what I'm seeing is it's Jaylen Brown. And I've also I want to make a note on that too, on that. I want to build that point. I saw they did like a mic'd up on Jaylen in this game too.
I was going to ask you about that.
They showed a little a little snippets of it throughout the game. But I also saw a video, like a compilation of it all put together. That is the leader for the Celtics right now. It's not Jason Tatum. And the next leader is probably Drew Holiday. And that is essentially what I've been kind of digging at for the last half of this playoff run, is that I think Jaylen is like officially taking the reins of this team. And I would not be surprised if when the Celtics win, I'm saying when the Celtics win the finals, he's up there with an MVP, a finals MVP in his hand, like I said, for those reasons. Because the leadership that he's showing, it's a growth point. And it's something that, I mean, we really haven't seen that vocal side of Jason Tatum other than just yelling at the ref for, missing his leg kick three. And it's things like that that the Celtics have that the Mavericks don't. And I'm also not seeing that leadership in game 1 and 2 from Kyrie on the other side of things. And that was something we talked about needed to happen. Was we talked about how he kept Luka in check for a vast majority of the season. That's hard to do. Like, not many coaches have been able to do that. Not many players have been able to do that. Like, the last guy that was on his team that probably was Dirk, but that was rookie year. Like, there's an aspect of, yeah, Kyrie was in Boston and, he was kind of taken out of his element, but it's like, no, you've done this dance before and you've been in toxic environments. Like, you need to still be a leader, and at least if you're not getting going, find a different way to win the game, and he's not doing that. And he was that X factor.
Right, and to follow up on that point, I think I'm glad you said what you said about Jaylen, because I thought that was a cool point that they kept showing he was the mic'd up guy, and we don't really get to see a lot of Jaylen Brown because the attention really is on Tatum. Now, I think Tatum played an effective game. I don't think he played, like, he obviously didn't shoot that well, but there was a good point of that Jason Kidd was it almost seemed like he was trying to play a mental mind game after game 1 by saying, "Oh yeah, Jaylen Brown's his team's best player."
Yeah.
But he's saying those things while he's only exclusively double teaming Jason Tatum. So it's like, it makes me wonder, like, they're obviously, the Mavs approach is, oh, we're going to get the ball out of Tatum's hands first. We're not going to let him get hot and let everyone else beat us. But that's the problem. Everyone else can beat you on that team. I agree that Jaylen Brown has been the most, like, he has shown the most leadership. I also think he's been the most consistent player in this series. And I think that's what's going to launch him into Finals MVP, because in game 1, everyone was on the Kristaps train. Game 2, it was the Drew Holiday train. And the consistent second piece on that, on both games, has always been Jaylen Brown, both offensively and defensively. From what I'm gathering from it, from the way everyone's talking about it, everyone's like, this was the Drew Holiday game, when in reality, it was the Celtics just doing what they do best. And that's also another, like, little thing to think about too, that, obviously it's easier to say it when it's happening in the moment, but the move of the offseason was Drew Holiday being traded to the Boston Celtics. And, if there's one team that's regretting everything, it's Milwaukee right now, thinking that the weird part about it was Milwaukee traded for Drew Holiday, they got a title. Then they traded away Drew Holiday, and the team he ends up joining is now in the title. So
time to get Drew Holiday on the Kings.
Yeah, exactly. We should have. I was like, that would have been super cool. But no, for Drew, I'm happy for Drew. I love the player that he is, and he also provides a level of leadership and experience that this team really needed. But he also respects the fact that it is Jaylen and Jason's team. So overall, I do think that Jaylen's going to win the Finals MVP, unless, even if JT has one good game, he's impacting the game. He had 12 assists and he's averaging 10 boards. So it's like he's doing his job elsewhere. It's not, and I think that's something I can respect about Tatum, is that he is, he's not just giving up when his shots aren't falling. He was 6 of 22. So it was like, he's still contributing and trying to impact the game in other ways.
And that's exactly why I was, digging into Kyrie there at the end of my little rant, was because there's different ways to win games when you're not being effective in what you normally do best. But just what Jaylen Brown's doing out there on the offensive end and the defensive end, like, yeah, he's not blowing up for crazy numbers, but it's just super efficient. He's all out effort right now. Like, he wants this title as bad as anybody on that court, and maybe more, who knows, but he's playing like it's more. And, like, seeing some of the defensive things, like in game 1, he had 3 steals and 3 blocks, and, like, yeah, he ended, like, I think it was -3 in his plus minus or something like that, or maybe that was game 2. But, like, the point that I'm trying to get at is there's so many things that the Celtics are asking of him to do that he's doing so well. And it seems like a recipe for winning the finals and then winning Finals MVP.
Yeah, and I think it's emphasized because it's funny with Jason. Jason receives a lot of flack for playing very I don't want to say individually. He is an ISO. He is an ISO hunter. Like he's not afraid to break, trying to dribble and create on his own. And we've seen a lot of games, and especially in the regular season, where Jaylen Brown does the exact same thing because they both are kind of on that level. But in these finals matchups, he's just been locked in on making the right play and taking the hardest assignment and just giving them all he has.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think for the whole Celtics team, they're so completely aware of the moment that they're in and just how close they are. Because especially after that first game, I think they felt like, oh, we can knock this team out real quick if we just take care of business the way we know we can. And listen, I think I stick by my take of Mavs in 7. Like I fully still stand by that from when I said it. But watching the way this Celtics team is operating and the way they're attacking this team, and the Mavs have these pre-built-in excuses of Luka just being hurt. And I don't think, and the weird part is, unless Luka actually sits out, the Celtics won't receive the same level of criticism they've had along the way here. Um, but even if it was an undeniably easier path to the finals, they look like the unquestionable best team. Their top 8 players can all go out there and make an impact, whether it's scoring or defensively, and they play like the best team in the league. And it's shocking to me. So I wouldn't be surprised if this series ends in 4 or 5. The only way they get one is if Luka and Kyrie have a game, and the problem is I just don't think I don't, and even then, I just can't see the Mavericks winning 4 out of the next 5 games, or 4. Yeah, like that's
Yeah.
just so hard to do when the Celtics don't lose that many like that.
Well, exactly. It's going to be really hard to come back in this series. If the Mavericks want a chance, it has to be game 3. Like if they drop game 3, it's a wash. You might pick up game 4, but you're just going back to Boston to ride a depressed jet home. Like it's you really needed to take advantage. If you're a Dallas, you really needed to take advantage of that bad Celtics game 2 that they had, where that ball was not dropping. Like,
Exactly.
and that has been, you knew that was going to happen because the Celtics have done this all year. You knew that was going to happen in one of those games. You had to get that one. And the fact that you come out and like, there's like, I'm looking at their game 2. Yeah, so Boston shot 10 of 39 from 3, which was good for
Right.
25%. And then Dallas brings the 2-1 icy hot pack, but they left it in the freezer way too long, and they finished 6 of 26 from 3 for good for 23%. Like, you can't follow up a terrible shooting night with an even worse one if you want a chance to win. And that kind of thing is the reason that I'm just sitting here like, I'm actually a little upset because I wanted this to be a very competitive series. I wanted it to be 7 games, whether it was Dallas or it was Celtics, and that's not what we're getting so far.
Yeah, and for the Mavericks to only have 26 threes taken also is a testament to just how good of perimeter defense the Celtics were playing. And again, it just emphasizes
Yep.
how they play as a team. And that was even in the minutes with Horford. And gosh, I think even if Kristaps is out, the strengths of this Mavs team is from Luka and Kyrie, and Boston has the answers for it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is unless PJ Washington and Derrick Jones Jr. get extremely hot to finish the series, I don't think they stand a chance either. And also, the Mavs need to stop playing Maxi Kleber if they want a chance. I understand why they throw a guy like him in there for the size aspect, and the threat of him was to shoot, and his shooting shoulder is taped up. He's uncomfortable. He can't shoot. And we saw at the end, like midway through the third, they were throwing in Dante Exum minutes, and I was like, well, at least you got somebody who can at least move and get up a shot. I'm surprised we haven't seen Tim Hardaway Jr. They got to switch something up. Somebody needs to step up because what they're doing right now isn't working. And it's funny how they're shooting so poorly from 3 and they're keeping out one of their best 3-point shooters. So I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, I think Tim Hardaway is banged up because there's no way in game 2, if I'm Jason Kidd, that I see how it's going in the first game and a half and keep throwing the same noodles at the wall expecting them to stick. Like, I would change it up at least and throw Tim in there. Like I just have to believe he's got to have some underlying like injury or something that's keeping him off the court. That maybe isn't fully reported. I don't know, but final thoughts for me. The first two games were a bit surprising. I thought it would be a split. I really did. I thought that the Mavs would pick up one of them, and it was probably going to be game one if they were going to. It didn't happen. Then I was like, okay, it'll be game two. No, it won't be game two. So now we go we go to Dallas for game three. And look, man, at this point, Dallas has to play absolutely perfect. And when I say Dallas, to be honest with you, I mean Luka and Kyrie have to play absolutely perfect. And from a guy we talked about who might be banged up, that may be hard to do. From a guy who might have some mental things going on playing against a team who he is 0-12 against since being on that team, that might not happen. Like, this is a big ask of this team now. You've dug your own grave, and you haven't even given yourself a ladder out yet. Like, you have to dig the steps to get out of it, and it's going to take a lot.
I agree. And, at the end of the day, I actually don't think anyone is really going to criticize Dallas for how they were more impressed that they got here in the first place.
Hell of a run.
I think that's the point that is going to be taken away, and it was really Boston's series to lose, and this was how everyone expected it. I think the hype that came into it, it's a job of the media, hype it up. That's why they play these games. It gets us all excited, and then the better team just shows why they're the better team. And it is a health thing, too. Like, listen, they can throw up as many injuries as they want for Luka, but at the end of the day, he might be banged up, but Boston isn't, and they're full strength, and they're coming at you. So for me, it's just Dallas needs to play perfect, and I think if Boston is beating this Dallas team as a team, Dallas can only beat this Boston team as a team. So it'll be interesting to see if the rest of the team can show up. Hopefully the home fans at least get them one. They deserve one. But at the same time, and I mean, who knows, we might probably just see one just so they can finish in Boston. So that's, we never know how that ends up.
Yeah, we never know.
So, yeah, no. The games were at least game two was interesting. First one was obviously, they tried to make it interesting, but yeah, overall not as exciting as we wanted it to be. But there's still a lot of good storylines coming out of it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next week and where we're going to be next week when this is all said and done.
So real quick, who do you got for game three?
I think it's Boston. I think Boston kind of puts the nail in the coffin here, and then Dallas will win game four, and then they'll finish. And I think the idea of them finishing in Boston, winning it in Boston would make sense to me. But at the same time, it's like, wouldn't be surprised if they swept them either.
No, I know, and I'm in the exact same boat. But for the sake of the fun of our pod, I'm gonna go ahead and say that the Mavericks are gonna pick up game three. Nice. Convincingly and make it interesting, and then they will get obliterated in game four, and then yeah, it'll be a tough game five in Boston, but Boston's gonna win it then, I think.
Yeah, for sure. No, that was great. All right then, so I guess we'll cap it off there, and who knows where we're going to be next week. And obviously before we get going, I want to give you a happy birthday shout out. Your birthday is on Thursday, so
appreciate it.
Wanted to show you some love before we get going here.
Yes, sir. 25. I've hit a milestone.
Yes. So now we can rent a car. We can drive to Boston. And we'll be good to go.
Okay, yeah. Bring it over here. Let's go. I'm ready.
All right, my brother. We'll close this episode out now. This was episode 46 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. Hit us up on any of our social medias: Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, X, Facebook. We have been a little bit, Ben and I try to manage these things on our own time, and it's a little bit more difficult. But now you are going to start seeing us on more platforms, guys. We figured out TikTok. We're going to post a lot of our clips there too, so you can always check us out there. And again, leave any comments, like, subscribe, all that fun jazz. For all you audio listeners out there, rate and review the show. We love it. And for all you YouTube fans, we love you guys so much. We obviously, I know you guys are going to see this now. We didn't mention at the beginning, we did some rebranding because we hung out over the weekend. We got some photos on the mural. We wanted to get a more official look. So we're really happy with how that turned out. So
the photos turned out great, guys. If you get a chance, go out, check out check out our page and give us a follow if you're not following us, because there's going to be some fire content coming out soon. We're starting to really find our stride on this, so it's going to be exciting. It's exciting for us, and it'd be just awesome to feel some of that support and love.
Absolutely. All right, guys. I'm Marcos Conan Negron. Beside me here, as always, is
Ben the Jet.
all right, guys. We'll talk to you next week. We love y'all. Peace.
Peace.